Hey, so Apple's announced the iPhone 14 lineup for this year. It's very similar to last year's, but there's definitely a lot of new stuff to go over and a lot to talk about. Alright, so this year you can get the regular iPhone 14, the larger iPhone 14 Plus, which has the same internals as the 14, the 14 Pro, and the 14 Pro Max. This video will stick to the Pro phones. The regular iPhone 14 and the 14 Plus will get their own video. So here's everything new in the Pro lineup. We got crash detection, satellite connectivity, the display, the new chip, new selfie camera, new back camera, new colors, and battery life. So let's just talk about that. Alright, so crash detection. It's a feature you hope to never use, but it's really cool how they achieve this. The iPhone 14 Pro houses a dual-core accelerometer and a high dynamic range gyroscope. If you're in a serious accident of some kind, the iPhone looks for sudden speed changes, the barometer looks for changes in cabin pressure, the microphones even look for loud noises, and if it thinks you've been in a crash, a prompt shows up on the screen. If you don't respond to the prompt, then it calls emergency services. Crash detection is also available on the new Apple Watches. The question arises about accidental triggers. I'm personally not going to be testing that, but I'm sure other YouTubers will find a way. The iPhone 14 and the 14 Pro also now have satellite connectivity. So on the off chance that you're just stranded somewhere with no Wi-Fi and no cell towers nearby, then the iPhone can still send text messages by bouncing off the nearest satellite in space. It's really cool. The UI actually shows you how to point your phone at the nearest satellite, and then you can send a text message to emergency services. You can't call anybody though because the signal is very weak. Apple's saying that you have to have a direct view of the sky and the horizon to do this. So if you're indoors or underground, or if it's really cloudy, it won't work. That's something to keep in mind. The most interesting part about this is that it isn't free. Apple's saying that it's free for up to 2 years, and after that it's going to be some sort of a subscription. I think it's a feature that should be in the box, included, but I guess that's just more money in Apple's pocket. Alright, let's talk about the display. Here's where you really start to notice the differences. Right off the bat, you'll notice that they got rid of the notch. It had become a part of Apple's design language now at this point, like all the MacBooks even now have it. But they did it, the transition to the pill has begun, and I'm actually quite excited to see how they incorporate that into the MacBook if they're going to. The iPhone 14 and 14 Plus still have the notch. It's only the Pro and the Pro Max that get the new notch design. Every year there's some differentiating factor between the Pro phones and the normal phones, and this year it's the dynamic island. Yes, they felt the need to name the notch, and it's stupid to have a name for a pill cutout, but it's the perfect example of how Apple does things. I mean, Apple's known for introducing features late, like years after Android's already had it. Apple also doesn't change things often in their phones, but when they do it well. With the announcement of the iPhone 7 lineup in 2016, Apple removed the headphone jack, and people were visibly disappointed in the crowd. And it was a genuine concern until 20 minutes later when Apple announced the revolutionary AirPods, the premium wireless earbuds that they designed to work better on the iPhone than any other phone. They did something new, solved the problem that they created, and turned a huge profit. In fact, AirPods as a business alone is worth $240 billion. Crazy, right? Apple got rid of Touch ID with the iPhone 10, and then they introduced Face ID, which is much faster and still unmatched in the Android world. Apple doesn't do things often, but when they do it very uniquely. With that information, let's talk about the dynamic island. Apple shrunk the sensors from last year's Face ID down by 30%, allowing it to live in a smaller, pill-shaped cutout. The dynamic island is not just a cutout though, with Apple introducing it as a part of the interface. They've turned it into this multitasking dock that gives you all kinds of information about apps running in the background as well as system alerts. It can show you incoming calls, Face ID, Apple Pay, charging and low battery indicators, AirPods connected. Even more than that, it shows you what music is playing on your iPhone at the time, and it gives you controls for scrubbing through the music, increasing the volume, everything. It also shows you live activities like timers, Uber rides, everything you can imagine. It's very useful. But that's all the dynamic island. Let's talk about the actual screens on these phones. The 14 Pro has a 6.1 inch screen, and the Pro Max has the 6.7 inch screen, which is just the same as last year, same size. They have slightly thinner bezels now and a higher number of pixels that nobody will notice. Trust me, the difference is very little. However, they do have a peak brightness of 2000 nits, which trust me, people will notice. It's almost twice as much as the 13 Pro in outdoor conditions. It's huge. The 14 Pro and Pro Max also have the adaptive refresh rate, same as last year. It goes from 1 Hz to 120 Hz and changes based on what you're watching. If you're looking at a static website, then it's going to be a lower refresh rate. And if you're doing something like watching a movie, playing games, or scrolling through content really fast, then it's going to have a high 120 Hz refresh rate, which is very smooth and gives you a really nice experience. The fact that it's adaptive really helps with the battery life. The low 1 Hz refresh rate also allows the iPhone to have always on display, which was not a feature up till now. When you put the iPhone to sleep, the brightness goes really low and the refresh rate falls to 1 Hz. It shows you the time, the widgets on your lock screen, and a little bit of the wallpaper. It's a really nice, subtle look. But it does affect your battery life. If you're a person who prioritizes battery life over aesthetic looks, which most people owning a Pro phone would be, then I recommend going into the settings and turning the always on display off. I mean, let's be real. Does anyone really need an always on display? If you want to look at the time, you can just tap on your phone. That's it. It's really easy. And you don't have to waste a lot of battery life with the screen always being on, especially because Apple keeps the wallpaper hanging around. So it's just a huge hit on your battery life. But hey, it's better to have the option and not to use it than to not have it. So good job, Apple. Alright, so the chip. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max have the new A16 Bionic, and you automatically know that it's not that much faster than the A15 from last year, because as soon as they introduced it, they went to comparing it to the A13 from 2019. You know, it's not a huge game changer, but it does power the new photonic engine, yet another name that Apple chose to give for no reason. It's basically just better image processing that gives you slightly more detail and a nice subtle texture on your pictures. Speaking of the pictures, Apple's bumped up last year's 12 megapixel rear camera to a new 48 megapixel camera. There's also a new 12 megapixel selfie camera. There's also a new 12 megapixel ultra wide that gives you sharper images as well as more detail in macro shots. This is the first time Apple's changed the camera resolution in years, so thanks Apple, that's just the way everyone wanted it. The Pro and the Pro Max offer up to 4K at 60 FPS in video recording, same as usual. HDR and ProRes are also supported. Last year, Apple introduced the cinematic mode in the iPhone 13 Pro, which some people might call portrait mode for video. This year's iPhones also have that, along with yet another feature called action mode. Action mode basically stabilizes shaky video and removes all the motions and vibrations. It just gives you the smooth gimbal-like footage. It records at 2.8K at 60 FPS, which is not bad at all. It's in fact pretty good. However, this kind of stabilization has been there in Android for some time now, and the video that you get is kind of noisy and blurry, so maybe it's not for everybody, but hey, again, it's there. Alright, let's talk about the battery life. It's actually the reason why a lot of people buy Pro phones compared to the regular ones. The 14 Pro gives you 23 hours of video playback, 75 hours of audio playback, and 20 hours of streaming video. The Pro Max, which is an even bigger battery, gives you 29 hours of watching video, 25 hours of streaming video, and 95 hours of audio playback. Easily, these phones are going to last you through the day, so if you're buying it for battery life, it's not going to be an issue. You don't have to worry about it. Alright, we have to talk about the pricing. The iPhone 14 Pro starts at $1,000 USD and 1.3 lakhs in India, and the 14 Pro Max starts at $1,100 or 1.4 lakhs in India. I have to mention that in case you plan on buying a phone from the US and using it internationally, you can't. The iPhone 14s now ship only with an eSIM in the United States, because of which they don't work in other countries. But if you do buy it in any other country, then it'll still have the physical SIM slot, so you can still use it. At these extreme prices, it's really difficult to say to anyone, go buy a phone. It really depends on what you need. For sure, this iPhone is the most up and coming iPhone, the iPhone of tomorrow. The Dynamic Island already has these Android APKs flying around because it's so popular and it's so new. And it's a fantastic feature. This is the future of the iPhone. You might be a person who really likes to take pictures, who needs the new back camera or the action mode. You might be a social media person who needs a new selfie camera. Perhaps it's just someone who really needs excellent battery life, and this phone gives it to you. You just have to decide what you're going to do with the iPhone, and that decides whether you need an iPhone 14 Pro or maybe just a regular one. I will be discussing the features of the regular iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Plus in a video that's going to come out really soon. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, that's been it for this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.